MFFLs. Welcome to the channel here at Utility Sports, where we cover all things NBA. And in today's video, we are specifically covering my Dallas Mavericks. For those who have been watching the channel, you guys know I'm a diehard Dallas Mavericks fan, but I just do also love the NBA and cover a ton of the other teams in the NBA. We cover it all here at Utility Sports. So if you guys are new, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button for more NBA coverage. Go check out some of the other content we have on the channel. And if you're a Mavericks fan specifically, smash that like button to support another Mavs fan. And let's jump into today's video, because this is where we're trying to get back to. Right back to here. We're trying to get back to NBA champions. So hopefully this video is a good luck charm for next season. Of course, definitely a tough end to the year. So for this video, what are we going to cover in this one? Well, we're going to look back at this past season, the one that just transpired. Obviously, a crushing defeat to the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. But we're going to talk about how this team can not only build on this season, but also look to maybe advance further next year and perhaps try and win a championship. Plus a little fun prediction by the end of the video, and one that was actually a very old prediction and one that I think was well ahead of its time. 2021-2022 playoffs. We'll talk about the bright spots from what I saw from this team. Of course, I watched them all throughout the regular season as well. Watched well over 80 Mavericks games this past year. So pretty good sample size here for the Dallas Mavericks. I do watch a ton of just NBA basketball, which is why I don't watch every single Mavs games, because even though I'm a Mavs fan, there are certain times where I do prioritize watching teams that I watch a little less frequent, just so I can maintain good coverage of every single team in the league, which as a Mavs fan does hurt my heart a little bit at times, but I think it's for the good of the channel and just for good of my knowledge of the league. Key decisions to make as well. Mark Cuban, Nico Harrison. This front office has a lot of decisions to make. 2022 NBA free agency. We're going to talk about the cap space Dallas could have, plus potential targets, including some trade targets, which is a little bit different than most of our videos here that we do for the offseason, but I think it's very useful looking at some trade candidates for Dallas. Then 2022, the NBA draft, the draft targets that the Mavericks could actually pursue with their first round selection. And then we'll fast forward to next year, what to expect from this team. Is it possible they get back to the Western Conference Finals? Do they flame out earlier? Do they push it deeper? We'll talk about that as well by the end. Again, if you guys are enjoying the content here, smash that like button, goes a long way. And also, I'm going to shout us out on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Links for all of those socials are in the bio. Go give us a follow on all three of those. That'd be super appreciated. We're also now posting on Spotify as well. So go listen to us on Spotify in podcast form if that is easier for you. And now let's go ahead and jump forward here with the 2021-2022 season. Of course, the one that just ended. The Mavericks 52-30, which was good for fourth in the Western Conference. A very great season. Anytime you amass over 50 wins in the NBA, it is definitely something to celebrate. And Dallas, of course, no exception here. They got a lot of flack for that final game, pushing Luka. And of course, he got injured against the San Antonio Spurs, missed the start of the playoffs, but they had a good reason to. It could have moved them up to third in the Western Conference, and maybe things would have shaked out different had they had home court advantage against Golden State. But again, you never really know, right? So at the end of the day, things played out the way it did, and now it's in the history books. So what did they do now that is written in the history books? Well, they made it to the Western Conference Finals, which is phenomenal. This is the first time since 2011, the year again that the Dallas Mavericks won the NBA championship, that they actually won a playoff series, and they won two of them this year, which is very difficult to do, and you can't undersell that. It is very tough to get to the conference finals. The teams that lose there, yes, it's disappointing to get so close, but yet be so far away. But at the same time, the end result obviously is what gets really celebrated, and that's winning a championship. But ultimately, you have to look at things as building blocks, and this is a big one here for Dallas. They beat the Jazz in 6 games. They beat the Phoenix Suns in 7, which I was very skeptical of. I thought the Suns would beat Dallas in 7. That was my prediction going into that series, which as a Mavs fan hurt me to say. But I thought to beat Phoenix, they were going to have to play their best. And for 4 of those games, they really did. They really played their best, upset Phoenix. And that was huge for this franchise. But then ultimately, Golden State just had their number in the Western Conference Finals. A team that's been there so many times, you can't really blame the Mavs with this current iteration. The way this team's built, you're just not going to stand up to a team like the Warriors. And I think we really saw it even though I think, with the way the Warriors defend, they gave up a ton of wide open threes that the Mavericks just did not connect on. Had they been hitting their shot, maybe the series plays out a little bit differently. Maybe you push Golden State to 6 or 7, and then you just need a couple lucky bounces and you're there. But ultimately, shots weren't falling, and you're not going to win a playoff series against a team as good as Golden State if you're not playing your best brand of basketball. And then we look at the playoffs here, and let's look at some bright spots. You're going to see Dorian Finney-Smith. He's my number one bright spot for this Mavs team that I want to talk about first here, because he does all the little things. He's the player for Dallas that gets the least recognition in national media. He's the player that Dallas progressed. They developed him. They found him. And I remember the days back when Dorian Finney-Smith couldn't knock down an open jump shot and wasn't actually that great of a defender, but he gave a lot of effort on that end of the floor. He is one of the most progressed players in the league over the last 5 years. It is incredible how much better he has gotten in his time in Dallas. He went from being a player who honestly wasn't a starting level player, but was in that role for Dallas because simply they didn't have other guys during their rebuild in the early stages of Luka's career, where they had players who were really ready to fill that role. And then Dorian Finney-Smith at this point now has developed into a very good 3-and-D wing, one of the best in the league. Honestly, I think he should have been an all-defense candidate. I think he should have made one of those teams. I think he's a better defender than Matisse Thybulle, but that's for a different video. Reggie Bullock, I think he was a bright spot this postseason as well, specifically defensively. Offensively, we know he doesn't really give you much. Okay, he's going to knock down open jump shots sometimes. It's a little streaky, and he doesn't really feel comfortable dribbling the basketball, doesn't put any pressure on the rim. But defensively, he was vital specifically for guarding guards. The Mavericks last year did not have an answer for point guards. This year they did. Reggie Bullock played very well in that role. Jalen Brunson, who I have an asterisk here because we're going to talk about later, he showed up big time in the absence of Luka Doncic, specifically to start the playoffs. We'll talk about what I think the Dallas Mavericks should do with him. Then we jump to Maxi Kleber, who was really struggling post All-Star break to end the regular season. And I started to think to myself, maybe the Mavericks would explore a Maxi Kleber trade in the offseason. And I know Mavs fans wouldn't want to hear that. The Wurzburg kid, love to have him here in Dallas. But realistically, his play wasn't up to par until we got to the postseason. And then everything started to click. And the phone started ringing again for Maxi Kleber. Mavs fans are going to know exactly what I'm talking about with his iconic celebration. And then Jason Kidd. I think Jason Kidd, one of the biggest bright spots for the entire postseason of all teams, because he really cemented himself as a great hire for the Dallas Mavericks. I thought he was a good hire when they hired him, and I know that was fairly controversial. A lot of people disagreed with that take, but ultimately, someone who knows the game as well as Kidd on both ends of the floor, someone who's a floor general offensively with great feel, and then defensively, multi-time all-defense type of player who had serious impact on that end. He understands team defense. And his role in Dallas as the head coach, he played it perfectly. And we had a bunch of other assistant coaches in Sean Sweeney, Jared Dudley, Kokokov as well. They all played a part here, but I think Jason Kidd specifically was the mastermind here for this team. Sean Sweeney's probably going to get some serious looks for head coaching jobs elsewhere. And if he leaves, I do think that will be somewhat of a significant loss for Dallas on the coaching staff. But for me, Jason Kidd, huge bright spot. And then we get to the biggest bright spot here, and no surprise, it's Luka Doncic. 3 straight All-NBA first-team selections. That's 3 in his first 4 seasons, which is insane. He plays at an even higher level in the postseason. And if we're talking long-term, and before this season, I said that Luka Doncic could become the best player in the league. And, maybe Giannis has taken that and really taken a good vice grip on that. But Luka, he is right there. And for anyone who doubts that, look at the numbers. And if you don't believe the numbers, watch the games. He is so good through contact. He's such a good facilitator. And he's such a good facilitator that teams dare a guy who averages over 30 points a game to beat them by scoring, which is insane. Most of the time, players who are that good at scoring get doubled, force the ball out of their hands. You can't do that to Luka. He is seriously one of the best players in the NBA, if not a top 2 guy right now. And realistically, for Luka, we could be talking about an all-time great, someone who is a top 10 player of all time. And to be honest with you, statistically and in terms of accolades, he's on pace to become arguably the GOAT. Now, I know a lot of people are going to push back on that and say Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and yes, probably those guys are actually better than Luka. But in terms of the raw accomplishments, the amount of triple doubles, the amount of stats he's putting up, the amount of winning he's done in his first few years in the league with a team that really needed him to do so without a co-star for most of the time, he's accomplishing everything. And for someone who already has a EuroLeague MVP on his track record, I think we're going to see a lot more success from him at the NBA level as well. Luka Doncic, the fact that the Mavericks have him is such a blessing. A player like him makes your franchise run in Dallas. You know, they went from being a team that was perpetually in the lottery after, you know, Dirk's prime started to run its course. And Luka's really the savior here. And I think, honestly, Mavs fans, I don't want to really compare the two. Dirk Nowitzki's my favorite player of all time, but Luka Doncic is going to surpass him as the greatest Maverick to ever play as long as he spends his whole career in Dallas. Now, if he doesn't, obviously that becomes a shakier statement, but assuming he does, he's going to become the best Maverick of all time in terms of accolades, statistics, so on and so forth, especially if he wins a championship. And I think realistically, he probably will at some point in Dallas. Then we move on to key decisions for the Dallas Mavericks front office to make. Jalen Brunson, he is headed toward unrestricted free agency. Of course, he had the unique second round type of contract where he does not actually have restricted free agency here, which becomes a very tough decision for the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban, after the game in Game 5 against the Warriors, said that they can spend more money than anyone else on Brunson, and he thinks Brunson wants to be there, which obviously points to the Mavericks having high interest in re-signing the former second-round pick out of Villanova, who has become a mainstay for the Mavericks. Then the center position. Quite frankly, Dwight Powell is not a starting level caliber center. I've been saying it for 4 years. I don't know how many more years I need to say it before the Mavericks finally make a change there. Jason Kidd finally started to work him out of the rotation the closer we got toward the end of the Warriors series, and we saw it against the Suns as well. He proved himself to be fairly unplayable. Yes, he's had his bright spots, but for the most part, the Mavericks really need to upgrade at center. We'll talk about potential outcomes for that. And then the contract situation between Dinwiddie and Bertans and a few others as well. We'll monitor possible trades that the Dallas Mavericks could look to make. Then as we transition here to 2022 NBA free agency, we'll look at the Mavericks cap space situation with negative $48 million in cap space. So they're probably not going to be the biggest players in free agency, but there's some ways that they could potentially work around that. They have the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is about $6.4 million. I could see the Mavs using it if they make some trades. You see some of the movable contracts I have on the bottom here. Dwight Powell around $11 million. Davis Bertans on one of the worst contracts in the league at around $16 million. And then Spencer Dinwiddie, another yikes there at $19.5 million. This is part of why the Porzingis trade didn't really make sense, even though, yes, the end result did get the Mavericks to the conference finals. Spencer Dinwiddie through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs shot 36% from the field, and Davis Bertans is one of the most unplayable defensive players in the league. So ultimately for me, yes, things panned out, but long-term, I still don't necessarily love that for the Dallas Mavericks. And then you look at Tim Hardaway Jr., who obviously broke his foot. There were some rumors that the Mavericks could look to move on from him as well. And they have a $10.8 million trade exception from the Josh Richardson trade to Boston, where they brought back Moses Brown. Of course, Brown did not end up sticking in Dallas, but they still do have a technical asset here in terms of salary cap space manipulation in a certain way. So they are $4 million over the luxury tax as we currently speak, which makes me a little bit more hesitant about their willingness to make aggressive moves unless we do see a Powell trade or a Bertans trade or a Dinwiddie trade, or maybe all three, and don't shut out the possibility of a Tim Hardaway Jr. deal either. And so in free agency, if they do find ways to open up cap space or make a few moves to find a little bit of wiggle room, what's the goals here? I think their primary goal is going to be retaining Jalen Brunson. And honestly, with the playoffs he had, I would be surprised if he is not a Dallas Maverick next year. The one thing I'm going to say, though, I would not love the idea of signing Jalen Brunson to a 4-year, $100 million contract. I'm going to be honest, as a Mavs fan, I love Jalen Brunson. He was a phenomenal draft pick, had a great postseason, but $25 million a year for Jalen Brunson, probably not what I would sign up for personally. If the Mavericks do it, I don't think it's terrible, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily what I would go for. Zach LaVine, however, is what I would go for. He's an unrestricted free agent. A lot of people assume Zach LaVine would just simply be back with the Chicago Bulls next season. And I'd actually made a video last offseason saying Zach LaVine's headed toward unrestricted free agency. He's not signing a contract extension. Maybe wave the red flag, even maybe just a little bit of an orange flag here a little bit to monitor Zach LaVine. And now there's reports that say maybe he'll actually consider free agency, maybe meet with a few teams, see what's out there for him. And the Mavericks could land him in a sign and trade. That's difficult to do, though, because you're going to need the Bulls' assistance to pull that off, which means you're probably going to have to send out multiple first-round picks. You're probably going to have to send out maybe the rights to Jalen Brunson back in that. So then Mavs fans might be saying, well, why would we do that? Because the Mavs' shortcoming really was the fact that they do not put pressure on the rim outside of Luka Doncic. Dorian Finney-Smith, not the best driver of the basketball. He's improved there for sure, but let's be honest with ourselves. He's not to the level of most wings in the NBA that are high caliber driving wings. Jalen Brunson as well. Obviously, he's got great footwork. His ability to maneuver in the paint is next level. But again, not another high quality guard in terms of his ability to actually get to the rim and finish above the rim, which I think is a serious missing element from Dallas. Zach LaVine doesn't do it as consistently as he did in his early days in Minnesota and his first couple of years with Chicago, but we still know this guy's a freak athlete. I think he would help the Mavericks a lot get more easy looks in transition, which they do a horrendous job of currently. Part of that is just the style of play of a Luka Doncic-led team, but I think LaVine could help them. Isaiah Hartenstein. Now, if they do use that taxpayer mid-level, Hartenstein could be a phenomenal addition at a little bit less than $7 million. He had a great year this past year for the Los Angeles Clippers. Isaiah Hartenstein has a really nice push floater from the mid-range to short-range area around the hoop, specifically in the middle of the floor, which I think would make him a great pick-and-roll partner with Luka Doncic. He's also a pretty good athlete. And then defensively, one of the more switchable bigs that's going to be available in free agency. So that is a potential option. And then when you look at his ability to step out behind the three-point line, he's not super consistent from deep, but he's definitely an upgrade over what Dwight Powell's been for the Dallas Mavericks. He's definitely an upgrade to what Dwight Powell has been for the Dallas Mavericks as a three-point shooter. There's no question about that. And then when we look at trade targets, Rudy Gobert is really the notable one here. Ultimately, though, I would be shocked if Utah did send him to Dallas. I think there's going to be other suitors out east that Utah would prefer to trade him to if they do end up dealing him, simply because, again, they're trying to compete in the Western Conference. They probably don't want to help a Western Conference foe. And then Jakob Poeltl here as well for the San Antonio Spurs. I think he's a trade target, but again, I would be shocked if San Antonio actually did deal him in division with the Dallas Mavericks. We know how tentative San Antonio has been in the past about trading some of their better players to Western Conference teams. They avoided doing that with Kawhi, sent him to Toronto, even though they maybe had some different, better offers from Western Conference teams. So I would be shocked if ultimately Jakob Poeltl did get dealt to the Dallas Mavericks. And then we fast forward to the NBA draft, and this is another key date here for the Dallas Mavericks because they actually do have their first round pick this year. That is pick number 26. So with that selection, there's a few guys that I would love for them to consider. I spend a ton of time on the NBA draft, so I know exactly which players fit here. Ron Harper Jr. out of Rutgers, a very talented wing who can work on both sides of the ball. Very good frame. He's strong. He's got great feet in terms of his actual technique defensively. And he's someone who's going to be a very good NBA player for a long time. And if you're looking for a third wing to be that complement to both Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock, and to add a little bit more strength and size, he's the perfect guy to add off the bench, specifically early in his career. And then we go to a Walker Kessler out of Auburn. He's probably off the board by the time the Dallas Mavericks pick, just considering he's probably the third or fourth best center in this class. But ultimately here, if he's available, he becomes the no-brainer rim protector out of Auburn, who blocks multitudes of shots at the rim every single game this past year for the Tigers. And I think the Mavericks really could use that level of rim protection. Another key note here for Kessler, he's a phenomenal rebounder, specifically when it comes to boxing out. He's very reliable and consistent in that regard, and we saw it. Kevon Looney dominated the Dallas Mavericks. I warned people about that matchup going into the series. The Mavericks need to get better at rebounding the basketball. Walker Kessler is great in that regard. And then a few other bigs here. If you look at an Ismail Kamagate from Paris, France, a Jalen Williams from Arkansas, who maybe is a second-round selection. We'll see if maybe the Mavericks move back or potentially move back up into the draft to find one of these guys. And then a Christian Koloko out of Arizona. I don't necessarily love Koloko's game myself, but I think it's possible the Mavericks could consider him if the other options are off the board. Then we jump into one of my old takes here, and you can see a tweet here from I believe that is 10/17/18, which is before Luka Doncic made his actual NBA regular season debut. And this is what I said about Luka. I said Luka Doncic is a future Hall of Famer. Mavs 2023 NBA Finals champs. You heard it here first. Hashtag MFFL. Hashtag Mavs. And if I end up getting this correct, which I'm very confident about the Hall of Fame take. By the way, I was probably the first person to actually realistically say that. You're looking at a potential outcome here where maybe the Mavs do make a push next year. We saw a huge jump this year. Now, the one thing to deal with next year, Nuggets are going to be better with Jamal Murray back and Michael Porter Jr. back, assuming he's healthy. And then you look at the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard's going to be healthy. Paul George is probably going to have a full season ahead of him. That team's going to be tough. But the expectation here is at least make the Western Conference semifinals, which means getting to the second round of the playoffs. And then the goal, when you have Luka Doncic, you have a chance. Push for a championship. If they make a few of the right moves and decisions that they need to, improve their depth a little bit, maybe make a bigger change like a Zach LaVine type, which I don't think is probable. But if they do, I think it could swing this franchise even further. And maybe, just maybe, my take from 2018 could play itself out into fruition here. You see how I thought of Luka Doncic before he even played an NBA game. And I think realistically, there's a chance here that maybe this actually happens. Mavs fans, leave a like on today's video to try and manifest it. And then when we look at the future, you know, it all comes down to Luka. Luka is such a special player. And again, he's such a great talent that it really does swing the franchise from where we were in 2017 to where we're at now in 2022. Massive change of, you know, events and massive turning of the tide here in Dallas. Thank you so much for watching, Mavs fans. Fellow MFFLs, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe, support one another, and let's hope for another great Maverick season next year. Definitely sad to see this one come to a close, but there was a lot of real serious positives, and I really did enjoy watching this team play this year. I'm sure you did as well. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, check out our socials. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.